Hello there, and happy Wednesday, and should I say happy politics? It's another edition of BC Poly Hot Stove. I am your host. I am the editor-in-chief of the Orca, McLean K, and I am live in the rock pile. I've missed the old girl.
Oh my
welcome,
gosh.
welcome back to the bowels of the legislature. And I am joined in a socially distant manner by...
I'm Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Business Association in Burnaby. But McLean, you're not in the bowels, you're in the peak,
That's
aren't
true.
you? Like, I feel like
That's
I have
true.
to climb like 1,000 steps to see you when I go over there.
Well, you're right. That was a misstep on my part. I feel like I'm in the bowels because I'm literally in a windowless room that used to be a CBC studio, and before that was actually a kitchen. This place is very old and has lots of history. But I haven't been here in 3.5 months.
Crazy.
So, and I have it to myself. So it's all kinds of weird.
Was there like dust on your desk because you have to like blow it off?
Well, no, because they clean it, which is nice. But I mean, let's just say the coffee filter had not been emptied. So yeah, I did some cleaning, and yeah, it's different. The maintenance staff comes by and does a check, an occupancy check. How many of you are in the room today? And I go, so far just me. I can't tell you if anyone else is going to come in because we're not coworkers.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird, but I'm kind of happy to be back.
Yeah. Have you seen anyone else around besides besides maintenance staff? Anyone famous? Have you seen anyone famous?
No one famous at all, actually. I saw one political staffer, an NDP one that I know. That's literally it. And both of us had a "what are you doing here" moment.
There you go. But soon, McLean, it will be a hub of activity, kinda, right? 2 weeks?
Yeah.
A week and a half?
It's next Monday, not the one after, which I think is the 22nd. I don't have the calendar in front of me. Working on the details now. We don't know. It's going to be sort of a hybrid in-person / remote or video sitting. I don't know what it's going to look like. They're still working on the details right now, and it's a lot of stuff that's never been done before. They're also working on things like how we're going to manage scrums, which will not be in person and haven't been for some time. There's a lot that's being worked on. We don't know the details yet. Even stuff like how many days a week we're going to sit. It's hard to know if that we're going to get. They want to be done by the August long weekend. I could see us sitting 5 days a week. Why not? In a lot of cases, they're going to be people dialing in from home. So
well, I mean, they haven't passed the budget, which is blown all to hell anyways. They haven't done any estimates, which they have to do by law. They haven't. Did they endorse the throne speech? They must have gotten through that.
That's a good question. I believe so. That's not as crucial.
No.
The estimates are going to be the thing that takes up the biggest chunk of time, and there's no, setting that aside. That has to be done, and it's time consuming.
And then there's no real sense yet as to what legislation they might bring in. Although one expects maybe something with ICBC, but we haven't seen that yet.
We haven't seen it yet, and we don't know. We haven't even had hints about stuff that might come out. I mean, in fairness, there's a lot going on.
Yes.
I suspect there will be some bills introduced this session, but this is going to be estimates, very heavy on estimates. I'll be surprised if there's much more than that. And if we are sitting either longer days or extra days, that's going to be the reason why.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how estimates unfold, because every minister will be talking about their financial plan, but then they'll also be talking about how it's been blown to smithereens, and here's the actual financial plan. One hopes that they give a little bit more detail than we get out of the Trudeau Liberals in Ottawa, but there'll be, for a lot of ministries, this will be very interesting to see all that. The numbers, like the health ministry, will be fascinating to see, for example.
Well, exactly. I mean, the budget was delivered in February, and it was out of date, 3-4 weeks later. Yeah. So, I mean, that's technically what they're supposed to be doing, is going through the budget for each ministry, and going through line by line and saying, what's this? Why have you spent this on this? But it's out of date. So it'd be fascinating to watch that happen.
There'll be lots of, the funny thing is, estimates will be better watched than normal, just because of the revelations that'll come through, just simply because it's the first time we've had any of this information. The funny thing about budget in February is, I was thinking back to this. First of all, we were all in that room, like tiny room, not socially distant. And Carol James was asked, well, what about this, what are they calling it over there, coronavirus? Is that reflecting the budget? And she's like, no, you can't plan for everything, and we'll take it as it comes. But there is contingency set aside. One suspects she would have liked that back, but
well,
who wouldn't?
Who knows?
Who wouldn't?
Honestly, I don't want to go too off the rails here, but the weirdest thing about coming into Ledge today is they have printed up, socially distant, please stay 6 feet away signs and all that. They're posted immediately next to the copies of the injunction against barricading the entrances.
Those are still up.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like you're looking at, wartime, a relic from the wartime. I mean, it's just from another life. And to see them literally side by side it's jarring.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. McLean, should we talk about why I love Alberta?
Any opportunity I get to talk about Sweet Home Alberta is welcome. So yes.
Well, McLean, Premier Jason Kenney released an announcement that on Friday they will move to the next phase of reopening in Alberta. And that next phase includes some things that I would love to see here in British Columbia. For example, if it was September, which it isn't, but if it was, schools would be open full time. Pools are going to be open. Casinos are going to be open. I don't really care about casinos, but okay.
Yeah.
Churches are going to be allowed to open up to a proportion of their floor space. Weddings and funerals can now have up to 100 people indoors to actually grieve the loss of the people who have passed away and to celebrate the marriages that are taking place. Sports teams are allowed to play again. Up to 50 interleague, don't go outside your little area, but you can play your little league baseball, you can play your softball, you can get back to all your sports sort of stuff. This is a major reopening for a province whose numbers of diagnosed cases are 3 times what British Columbia's are. But before you go, oh my God, 3 times, deaths are fewer than in British Columbia, and they test Alberta tests everyone. They are mad testers. They love testing. They test. They've done tens of thousands more tests than British Columbia has done, which explains why their numbers are higher, but also why their deaths are lower. Really eye-opening to see what's going on there in Alberta. I hope it ramps up the pressure on John Horgan and Adrian Dix to reopen more of British Columbia, especially outside the Lower Mainland. There's no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to go swimming and trail. There is no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to play Little League Baseball in Fort St. John. There's no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to play softball in Kitimat or to go to church in Invermere. I'm thinking of random places now in BC that I can put my finger on. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to go to a restaurant in Valemont. These things are happening.
Or Victoria, for that matter.
Or Victoria.
Victoria. It's funny, you mentioned Alberta, and it's interesting in that Alberta, like BC, and in fact, I think most jurisdictions, hasn't seen COVID evenly spread throughout the province. No. Even in the cities, the 2 major cities of Alberta, Calgary got it much worse than Edmonton, much worse.
Although Edmonton now has it worse than Calgary.
Yes, but originally, and you're absolutely right, but originally it was the reverse. And so it's challenging for any jurisdiction to find a one-size-fits-all approach, but, I mean, they're taking some pretty big steps there.
Yeah, I want to talk about 2 things Alberta's done that I think are brilliant. First of all, they wanted to mask up the public as much as possible. Wear masks. But they realized that not everyone has access to masks, not everyone can make masks. So they bought tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of masks. And instead of forcing people, instead of trying to get them to people in weird ways, they actually partnered with Tim Hortons, McDonald's, and other fast food places, used their shipping, their natural food delivery network to get these masks out to all these little chain franchises. And those are becoming the hubs for the community. That's where you go to get your masks. Go to Tim Hortons, go through the drive-thru if you're nervous about going inside, get a mask for free. Government's paying for it. And this, to me, was a stroke of genius because you could send one to every city hall in the province, but there's only one city hall in a big city, number one, so you're drawing people in there. Number two, you don't have that built-in distribution network where you can just take a pallet of the stuff to McDonald's headquarters, McDonald's warehouse, and it can get out to everywhere else with the coffee shipments and the buns and things like that. Brilliant stroke of whoever came up with that innovative thinking in Alberta. Kudos to you. Saved the province a ton of money, got masks out quickly. And it boggles my mind that I read NDP criticism of this idea. Oh, you're picking winners and losers. Why should we rely on private business to get these things out? We should rely on private business because they have the better distribution network to get into these communities than government does. I can't fathom why they're complaining about it. And to me, it's just one of those classic, you're in opposition, so you feel like you got to complain.
Well, I I agree with you. And I think one of the things that we've seen over and over again is that it's better to have a good plan today than a perfect plan 2 weeks from now. And if whoever in the government of Alberta said, you know what, why don't we try A&Ws and McDonald's and Tim Hortons, as you say, because they already have the distribution networks. We can get that going tomorrow, as opposed to trying to develop something ourselves, which may or may not be better 3 weeks from now. Yeah. I think it made more sense for them to go right away. I've also seen some sort of bewilderment and wonder, I think, especially from people in big cities, in Vancouver, Toronto, that kind of thing. Why A&W? That's so random. Yeah. If you've ever traveled in small towns, you know, because you've done this. But if you've traveled in small towns, I think across Canada, actually, you don't necessarily see, you know, McDonald's in your like 3-horse town in Alberta, but there is an A&W in every single village and hamlet, especially along highways. And I speak from experience in Alberta. Choosing A&W was actually kind of a stroke of genius and reflected some actual boots on the ground knowledge.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of Dairy Queen was like that in the 80s in BC. There was, every little town had a little Dairy Queen. It's because franchising was cheap. So that's why they, much like Subway today, there's tons of Subway franchises, number one franchise in the world, that's why. You know, it makes sense. I don't know who to give credit to in the Alberta government. I'll pick Katie Merrifield because she's my favorite. So well done, Katie Merrifield. Brilliant idea. Don't know if it was you, but I'm going to pretend it was. And if it was you, kudos.
Noted A&W aficionado Katie Merrifield.
Yes. I can just see her. I can just see her with her A&W root beer, you know, sipping away, enjoying it completely. One other thing Alberta has done, and this goes back to reopening. Jason Kenney has made it clear the threshold for reopening is not active cases. It's hospital cases and ICU cases. Yeah. And this is where I find the disconnect now happening with the NDP government here in BC. We were told we had to flatten the curve, but the curve wasn't the curve of infections. The curve was hospital. Like we could not overwhelm the hospital system. Well, I think in Alberta, I forget, they're down to like 25 people, I think, in ICU. They have something like 5,000 ICU beds. They flattened the curve. We've done even better in BC. I think we have 5,000 ICU beds. We have 4 people as of yesterday in intensive care. We have more ventilators than we can shake a stick at. We have the space. Now, it sounds terrible to say because you don't want anyone to get infected with anything, but we've shown death rates are very low for this disease in British Columbia. We've figured out the way to manage it. Most of the people who have passed away because of long-term care, and we've got to figure out a way to protect that. But like, there's an opportunity here. Let's open this up. Let's get kids going again. Like, you know, it's been 3 months off school for my kid, except for the last couple weeks, 2 days a week. He's been 3 months off sports. You know, there are physical fitness reasons to restart sports, to restart routine and recreation. There's mental health reasons to do it. Like we are now, you know, withering away the mental and physical health of people in order to protect them from this virus over here. This virus, which we've already contained and has shown that, you know, we're down to 4 ICU patients. So it's time to be more aggressive in opening up. It's time to, you know, still make sure you're taking all the precautions, sanitize, like that's all great. But churches should be allowed to worship. Funerals should be allowed to have more than 100, or to have at least 100 people. Let's get on with this, and we've got to find a way to encourage some visits into long-term care because we've gone 3 months without seeing the most frail and elderly grandparents and parents. We have got to find a way to open that up, at least to spouses and children. Like, find a way to do it so that we can get back in there because that's taking a toll on those institutions as well. So that is my rant. It wasn't about zero infections. It was about making sure the hospital system isn't overwhelmed. We did a good job of that. Let's get on with it.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that was the original pitch, if you like, of flattening the curve. That is literally what we were told to do, is let's not overwhelm the health system. It wasn't let's stamp out COVID, which isn't possible because there is a whole world outside BC. Yeah. But barring a treatment or vaccine, I think this is the only way forward.
Yeah, and look, I know they're working on reopening the film industry now. All those people from outside, you know, the stars, The Flash, Supergirl, they're going to have to, you know, wait 2 weeks in isolation in BC before they can start to work. It's my understanding. Okay, I get all that. We're not New Zealand. We can't we don't have a moat around us. You do. You have a moat around you, but we're still sending people across on BC ferries. But we've got to open it up. And, like, we need some travel. People are going stir crazy. There is mental health issues there as well. So let's do it. Let's get churches going. Like the churches have been, well, all houses of worship, not just Christian churches, have been incredibly patient and incredibly
Yes.
deferential to this at a time where they must be reeling financially, many
yeah.
of them, where they must be on the brink financially of issues, and where they've lost, they're trying their best, but they don't have that same connection to people. Let's get those going too. That's important for people's mental health as well.
Could not agree more. And speaking of reeling and going stir crazy, can we talk a bit about how politics? I think we can say it's back now, right? Like it's not coming back. There was an
Owen
incident.
Ma brought it back. I blame her.
Well, yeah, that was the incident I had in mind. Why don't you walk us through what happened there?
Okay, so I'm on Twitter the other night, and Bowen Ma's, someone tweets out, or she may have even tweeted out, a fundraising pledge, fundraising campaign. And basically, to boil it down, it was like, because of me, John Horgan is premier and not Christy Clark. Can you imagine Christy Clark in charge of British Columbia during this COVID-19 pandemic? Send money to Bowen Ma, care of BC NDP. Rightfully, the people on Twitter who generally, I would say, skew towards Bowen Ma's world of thinking as the wannabe BC AOC, they jumped on her and said, hold up, like, fundraising off the back of COVID-19 is not cool. Like, that's disgusting. And it is. And she walked it back once it was flagged for her that that is not appropriate and was beyond the bounds of good taste. So she did walk it back. But I want to talk about that comment. Like, imagine if Christy Clark were in charge during the COVID-19 pandemic. And McLean, I will submit to you that if Christy Clark was in charge during the COVID-19 pandemic, nothing different would have happened, or very little different would have happened. And
I tend to agree. I don't think there's any evidence that she would have ignored Dr. Bonnie Henry or the provincial health officials at all. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
And it's hard because the NDP have been bending over backwards to say, the Greens and the BC Liberals have been great.
Yeah.
They've been really supportive. And so to say they've been great, but also thank God they're not in charge is just, oh, come on.
Yeah, give me a break. Now, look, do I think Christy may have done more press conferences than John? Maybe. But even if she did, she's still doing less than Justin Trudeau. She's still doing fewer than Andrew Cuomo. I always call him Mario, like I'm 1,000 years old. Andrew Cuomo. She's still doing less than governors of major states. Like, she's still probably doing less than Jason Kenney. Like, it's okay whether the health minister was the face of it or the or John Horgan. Frankly, I think Horgan made the right pick having Dix be the face of it, simply because no one's going to be better on a file in that whole NDP government, including the premier. No one's going to be better on a file than Adrian Dix. He has a mind for the excruciating minutia of a $20 billion a year operation that none of the rest of them would have. Like, can you imagine if Claire Trevina's health minister, I'm sorry, or Bowen Ma, John Horgan's doing those press conferences. But I think, Christy Clark's health minister was Terry Lake, correct?
That's right.
I could see her allowing Terry Lake and Dr. Henry to manage that. I don't see anything different that Dix did that Terry Lake would have done. In fact, Dix has been very complimentary of some of the things that Terry Lake left in place on the pandemic planning side. So I just find that really, it's stupid. It's just stupid logic. The only thing that Clark may have done different is there may have been more supports and less deferrals for businesses and employers. Mm-hmm. Like right now.
Yeah.
Maybe Carol James's whole plan has been basically to punt costs on businesses down the road, but there is that deferral cliff coming where employer health tax, carbon tax, hydro bill, like they all come due at the same time. That's going to be a big problem, and you talk about second wave of the virus, there's going to be a second wave of bankruptcies when that hits. But, so she may have done more for businesses kind of along the way. Okay, but most of that was contained in BC Liberal documents and requests to the provincial government, some of which were enacted. So I just don't, I just think it's like, it's just crass politics during the pandemic.
I mean, and I think what made people upset about it was not that she wanted to have, a hypothetical what if conversation like you're just having. It's the fundraising.
Yeah.
That was the part that got people really upset. It was not necessarily, we think we've done a good job. They would have done a worse job, which you can argue with, but it was all give us money.
And it was the boogeyman. Just imagine Christina Joan Clark's hand reaching out from under the bed and taking BC, leading us into the pandemic and killing thousands. Like that's sort of the boogeyman nuance. So I do think it reinforces why Bowen Ma is not in cabinet, honestly. I mean, he's had chances to put her in. He hasn't. I suspect she'll be in before the next election just because of attrition, and they don't have a huge caucus, and that's a must-win seat for them. So I suspect she'll get in, but this no doubt gives the gives Horgan Land a little bit of pause about her capabilities and.
Well, I mean, when it comes to Twitter, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, and if your brand is being snarky on Twitter, you're vulnerable to going across the line, and I think that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Carol James says the money from the federal government isn't enough. Have you seen this?
It's speaking of managing the pandemic. I mean, it was correct me if I'm wrong. It's $14 billion, the aid package from Ottawa
nationally.
Yes, exactly. But it's not going to be enough here in BC, which I think is true. But I mean, at a certain point, it will be interesting, and I don't think interesting is the right word, but it will be fascinating years from now to tally the tab from COVID-19. It's going to be sobering is a word that comes to mind.
Yeah, it'll be unbelievable, even in British Columbia. Look, her whole plan is only $5 billion of supports for it anyways, so maybe it doesn't cover that off quite. It wouldn't cover that off because Quebec and Ontario are going to take the largest share of it, of the $14 billion. But listen, I'm of the mind, like, hey, any port in a storm, McLean, like, you want to give us a few $1 billion, we'll take it. Like, we've spent it, so we might as well take it from the government. But, the problem with Trudeau now is he's on this announcement today kind of hamster wheel, and he spits out this stuff, and he can't even provide a budget. He says, things are too wild, was his word, to actually provide budget estimates. We think we're now going to hit $1 trillion in national debt, which is terrifying. That's not counting the provinces or other levels of government or consumer debt. That's just straight federal government debt. But he keeps adding more costs, but he also adds more regulations, more rules. And if, for example, like Chris Gardner, our president, and I, we were kicking around today, what's going to happen with long-term care homes in BC? So I think instinctively Dix would like to nationalize them. But you can't really afford to nationalize them. Like, where is the money going to come to fund those operations? Because if he nationalizes them, all his wage costs, bureaucracy costs, regulatory costs shoot through the roof, and he won't have the wriggle room to raise the cost of that these people are paying, because now they're paying it. It's a totally different world when you're paying into a government program versus a private program. So, like, how is that going to happen? You're going to see major healthcare, the costs are just going to shoot through the roof simply because we deferred so many surgeries and whatnot. So all those costs are coming to bear, plus the federal regulatory and other costs. This money, I guess, is just going to come from borrowing, and we just have to grit our teeth and bear it.
Well, you're right. And I mean, I guess it's not really a problem. Well, it is a problem in that the NDP, like a lot of governments across this country, have found that there isn't really a lot of extra tax room. No. There's not a lot of appetite or capacity for the economy to absorb substantial tax hikes. I mean, and even if, you'll hear some people in the NDP and then on Twitter saying, well, we'll just tax the rich. Even if you literally shake every penny out of Chip Wilson's pockets, it's a drop in the bucket. It's not going to fund one thing, like you mentioned, nationalizing care homes. That's not going to cover it. And there are only so many Chip Wilsons, and it's a one-time only thing. So you're right. The money has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is not obvious. Like
Newfoundland and Labrador were basically at the brink of bankruptcy. They're now talking about renewing their offshore oil drilling programs. And that's all about revenue, and it was Gordon Campbell who banned offshore drilling here in BC. You do wonder, like, at some point, is money going to get so tight that you have to look at these? Can you imagine the NDP having to look at offshore drilling? They're more into, apparently, according to Twitter, they're more into murdering baby moose. But if I'm reading Twitter correct, but yes, you are. But this is the thing. I'm not talking offshore oil, but just in general. The way out of this is we've got to grow the economy. We've got to grow the economy as quickly as possible, and that means taking off some of the fetters, removing some of the red tape and regulation, the pointless stuff, to get that kind of economic engine going. And we've got to find a way to encourage entrepreneurs. We've got to find a way, after we've just spent 6 months kicking the snot out of them, basically forcing them to shut down and many of them to go into bankruptcy. We need to find a way to encourage another crop of them to come through and start building businesses here.
And as a small example of that, I want to give a shout out to Jody Vance's piece this morning. If you read it, she talked about in Delta, and this is, again, a very small aspect. We're talking about restaurants and patios. Delta City Council had a very bright idea. They went to restaurants and said, what do you need? And they said, well, basically, we want to be able to expand onto sidewalks and patios. And the city said, okay, go do it. Don't worry about licensing. Don't worry about permitting. Just go do it. And we'll worry about it afterwards. If that's what you need, then let's give it a try. And as I guess Jody was talking with one of the councillors on the radio earlier this week, and she asked, well, what have there been objections? Has been concerns raised? And the answer was literally none, not one, not a single angry letter, nothing. Everyone's just, okay, that's a good idea.
So Delta's not burning because I'm having my my hamburger out on the patio on the side. Wow.
Apparently not. Chaos. It is not Mad Max there south of the Fraser until you try and cross the Fraser.
What a crazy world we're on. What a crazy world. Can I ask you? Can I get a rant from you now? Is that possible?
Please.
McLean, the BC Conservative Party is now outpolling the BC Green Party, according to one federal polling agency of provincial politics. It's a national group that was polling in BC. Tell me why I shouldn't be taking out my Conservative Party of BC membership and immediately running in the next election under their banner.
Well, let me give you two reasons. The first is that particular poll, the sample size was ridiculous. I think it was something like 261 people. That's astonishing. It's not a good sample size. The other one is, is there a BC Conservative Party worth talking about here? The last election, which was 3 short years ago, BC's 3 major parties, and there are 3 major parties in British Columbia, the BC Liberals, the NDP, and the BC Greens, in that order. Together, amongst them, they garnered more than 97% of all valid votes cast. That is astonishing. Mm-hmm. So to regularly gauge support for 4 parties is either what? It's either a mistake, or it's an inaccuracy, or it's projection, or perhaps it's somebody trying to see if there is, some wishful thinking, and maybe there are some people that want to hive off the BC Liberals, and maybe, but it doesn't happen at election time. It doesn't happen in the ballot box. The BC Conservatives are in the same kind of 0.5 to 1% realm as places like the parties like the Christian Heritage. You mentioned a one that I wasn't aware of when we were chatting earlier this week, an Employers Who Want to Do Things Party, and I'm not going to get the name right. And of course, my favorite, the Vancouver Island Party, or VIP, only because of the acronym. I don't understand why we need to poll for 4 parties in this province. It would be very interesting to take those exact same respondents and say, if there are only 3 options, only 3 realistic options, why not just have those 3 and then other? Because I'm willing to bet, and I actually don't know this for a fact, but I'm willing to bet that there are about as many people who either left their ballots blank or spoiled it intentionally as voted for the BC Conservatives. This is no comment on the BC Conservatives. They might be very fine people. I don't happen to know any that I'm aware of. But the point of the matter is they get between 0.5 to 2% in elections. Yeah. They are not a large party. This is not arguable.
No. Look, the BC Conservatives only had 2 sort of successes in the last election campaign, and that was they ran candidates against Mark Dalton, the most socially conservative BC Liberal, for not being socially conservative enough. They ran a candidate there, and they ran a candidate in Courtney Comox against, I think it was Jim Benninger, the Canadian Forces, or Naval Forces, or whatever. Anyways, split off enough votes from the BC Liberals to get the NDP elected in both of those ridings. I do not understand a political movement that would suggest, social conservatives, I don't get it. How can you not think Mark Dalton is socially conservative enough? That boggles my mind. They're a non-factor and should be treated that way. By the way, a lot of the tweets that came out around that poll were like, can even 11% or 12% of British Columbians name the leader of the BC Conservative Party? McLean, I regret it to this day, but I'll show you, this tells you how the pandemic has softened me. I had a great tweet basically talking about how the Conservative Party of BC was circling the Bullen, but I didn't do it because I felt like, I don't know, making fun of Trevor Bullen's name. I mean, my last name's Bateman, so making fun of someone else's last name is kind of a Well,
it's also one of those jokes that works if you know who Trevor Bolin is.
Right, exactly.
And I don't know Trevor Bolin. He might be the nicest man on earth, but I mean, so might the leader of the Vancouver Island Party.
Exactly. You love that Vancouver Island Party. You love that.
Well, I mean, any party that it's kind of amazing that no other party has come up with the VIP acronym. I mean, it's just great.
Yep. You support them, you're a VIP. Okay. Money laundering.
Yes.
So,
apparently that's still going on.
So apparently money laundering is happening. The Cullen inquiry is going on in Vancouver. I would say news out of it is sporadic at best.
At best.
I've seen a few Canadian press articles reprinted in the Globe and Mail where they consider money laundering to be gospel that's happening, and it's happening more than you think, and Gary Mason could stop it if you just all would listen to him and his sanctimony. But, the interesting thing is Ian Mulgrew, who is actually someone who's worth listening to on court issues in British Columbia because he covers courts and has covered them for years.
Yep.
He wrote a great book called Pot Inc. 20 years ago that really reshaped how a lot of people thought about the marijuana industry in BC, and I would say helped led towards legalization that we have now. He's been writing about it. He's written about this a couple times, and both times he's written about it, he's been like, the experts they're bringing forward are all saying it's not really special to BC. Yeah, the Feds should probably fund more response, but it's happening in every major country, every Western nation. And is it really money laundering if a Chinese billionaire shows up and wants to gamble away $500,000? Is that money laundering, or is that just, a Chinese billionaire wanting to gamble away $500,000? Like, for me, I'd put $50 on the Packers to win the Super Bowl. This guy's putting $500,000 on black because it's the same amount of money. So
because he can, yeah.
Because he can, right? So I just find it fascinating because this does not seem to be going the way David Eby has painted it would go.
I mean, at the very least, not yet. You're right. It's easy to forget this is going on, and not just because of COVID. Is that you're right? Is that there are no big splashes. And I think if you were counting on there to be big splashes, that's a problem. It will be interesting if this continues and the Cullen inquiry continues as we've been seeing, if they decide to try and continue with the narrative anyway in the next election. Is that they'll just kind of ignore him. Well, there was an inquiry. They'll count on people not having paid particularly close attention. They'll just say, well, there was an inquiry, and it found there was money laundering in BC. Of course there's money laundering in BC.
Course.
There's money laundering in Moose Jaw.
Yeah.
But that's what I think is going to happen. I think there's not going to be a smoking gun. They are going to find that there is some money laundering happening in this province, because how could there not be? And they're going to, in the election campaign, they'll say, well, there was a public inquiry. And that'll be kind of they'll just leave that hanging.
Yeah, I think you're right. The funny thing, too, is these experts, none of them seem to have any specific knowledge of BC. So why is Cullen calling them? Mulgrew writes, their evidence suggested the so-called Vancouver model, which was coined by Sam Cooper and, coined in documents obtained by Sam Cooper from Global and from the Globe and Mail folks. The so-called Vancouver model was an oversimplification of globalization, i.e. nothing happening here was special to Vancouver. It's happening up and down the Western world. And that, maybe you need more federal resources, and, maybe Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Britain, and the U.S. should work more closely together.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to preempt the angry tweets that I know are coming.
Oh, no, send them.
One
At
is
McLean
suggesting there is no money laundering in this province. No one.
Oh.
No one is suggesting that doing more to stop it would be a good thing. Yeah. However, there does not appear to be something special about BC, at least not yet.
No. And they've said that, I think of 14 criminal enterprises, 10 use BC, but not just BC. They also use other provinces as well, in different mixes and different kinds. Like, these are sophisticated things, and, it doesn't, watch Ozark, you'll see how quickly and how many different ways you can launder money. And every time you put up a block, they'll go around, Marty Bird will go around and find a different way of doing it. So
is that worth watching? I need a new like Netflix or Disney Plus show.
It's dark, but man, I love Laura Linney. Like, she's wonderful. So it's worth it for her. But it's dark. Don't watch it with the child around, for sure.
Okay, no problem. We're trying Space Force. It's okay. It's okay.
We just finished all 5 seasons of Peaky Blinders. I
haven't seen that yet. I have to do that.
It's on Netflix. Watch it with the closed captioning on, just because sometimes their Birmingham accent is a little hard to understand, and it also gives you like little clue. It gives you the hilarious thing about it is that they use like punk rock songs at various times, but it gives you the lyrics of the punk rock songs while it's going on, and you're like, man, punk rock is dark. Like, it's like, wow, that's rough.
We tried, we're going off the rails here. We tried watching a Scottish sitcom based on my parents' very hearty recommendation called Still Game.
Okay.
And the people are working class Glaswegians.
Yeah.
I was able to understand like maybe every fifth word.
Yep.
My wife probably half that. So she got through, I think, 7 minutes and just said, I'm watching a foreign film without subtitles, and I can't do this anymore.
Was it funny enough? Was it funny? Did you enjoy it?
I thought it was funny, but I mean, she's not wrong. I mean, those accents are thick to the point of being impenetrable.
Yeah. So our threshold is Dairy Girls. That's about as much accent as we can take. But again, we watch that with closed captioning on. I'm also, by the way, doing a rewatch of Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, nice.
The 2000 series, and it holds up. If you're wondering, it holds up. It's good.
We've been meaning to do a rewatch. We own everything they ever did on DVD, including the mini movies they did in between. And we keep meaning and threatening to do a rewatch, but
yeah, I don't know, the distrust in those early days, and Izadama is Cylon, and whoo, like it's so good. And the one where Starbuck gets lost and crashes on the planet, and the Adamas will not leave her, like.
Yeah,
and then,
I gotta know. That was like the best show ever.
The commander tells Lee, if it was you, I'd never leave. Like, screw civilization, we'd be here forever trying to find you. Amazing.
I loved that show enough that when I learned that a friend of mine had worked on production in Battlestar Galactica. Yes. But he started sharing some stories about, well, these people are cool, these people are jerks, and it was almost traumatizing. Like, no, I can't hear that this person isn't nice. I cannot hear that. I need to be able to watch the show unencumbered by all that stuff. Yeah. I don't want any baggage. Unless you're telling me that, Adama, he didn't mention anything about Adama, is like the greatest guy in the world. Okay. Yeah. But this person is a jerk? No, I can't. I cannot. I don't want to know.
Baltar is so creepy. I don't know why she didn't throw him out the airlock, President Rosalind. Like, he is so creepy. Yes. Anyways, there you go. I also, on a very much more serious note, McLean, I just want to send along condolences to Shirley Bond.
Yes.
So Shirley's husband, Bill, who, if you've spent any time around the BC Liberals or any time in Prince George, you've probably met Bill at some point. Wonderful guy. Kind and friendly, and like just a perfect match for Shirley. Loved Prince George, loved Shirley, loved their family. He passed away, I think, earlier this week.
I think so.
Definitely, my understanding is he was sick. Not a lot of us, I think, knew it outside of Team Bond, as we call them. But very very sad to hear, and our condolences to Shirley and to her family and friends, and to Prince George as a whole, because I feel like you've lost a real champion for your community. And he was I only met him a couple times, but he was always very kind to me and very friendly. And yeah, he'll definitely be missed in and about BC Liberal land and Prince George.
I was very sorry to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, Shirley, I think, is getting a lot of life from people tweeting her about stories about Bill and stuff like that. So if you have time and you knew Bill at all, please send her a message. I think that's meaning a lot to her and the family at a time that is very difficult to grieve, because you can't go up there and grieve the way that people normally would. So that's got to be tough.
Yeah, can't imagine. We've talked before about the pain that people must feel when they lose someone in this time where they can't have mass funerals. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's not great. It's a rough time for sure. So I'm at Jordan Bateman on Twitter. He's at McLean K. We'll be back next week. McLean, if possible, I'd like to tape on Tuesday next week. Wednesday I have a ICBA board meeting, so
I think we can make that work for you.
Excellent, that would be great. And look forward to seeing you all then.
We'll see you then. Till next week. Till Tuesday.